Luckily, we are coming out of it. As the council members mentioned, make sure you get your vaccine. That's really the only way that we're going to come out of this pandemic and stop the mutant strains from really taking over. So please make sure you get your vaccine. We'll talk a little bit about water sewer infrastructure updates. That's a carryover from the prior administrations, something we take very seriously in the city of Lakewood, something all prior administrations have dealt with and worked with, and my administration is no different. So we'll provide you an update on that. And then we'll get into development within the city, and that's where Director Leininger is going to chime in and talk about all the exciting projects that we have going on in Lakewood. There were some delays because of COVID with some economic development, but we are really cruising now and excited to get a lot of projects underway. So recent criminal activity, wanted to talk again a little bit about what has happened within our community. You know, it's nearly every day that we're seeing some sort of gun-related violence across our region and nationally. You know, these gun-related incidents have become far too common and now have come into our own community of Lakewood. After a year-long pandemic that's resulted in loss of income and livelihood, paired with easy access to guns, my fear is we may see similar instances over the coming months. We must have an appropriate and effective response to these incidents, which I'll discuss a little bit more on the next slide. But before I get into the steps that we're taking here in Lakewood, I want to provide an update on some of the recent events. As you can see from the slide, we also have another event, which was the homicide here not that long ago. The suspect was arrested. Both suspects were arrested in that case as well. But as you can see from the slide, the suspects have been arrested or apprehended by LPD. I want to thank the police department and their hard work and careful steps to apprehend these criminals. I do want to take a moment and talk directly about the incident at Madison Park that occurred in mid-April. At 6:45 p.m. on Tuesday, April 13th, Lakewood Police Department were called to the park after a report of gunshots being fired. Police arrived at the scene and discovered an 18-year-old male with 2 apparent gunshot wounds. The victim was quickly taken to Metro and is recovering. At this time, we have 2 people charged and in custody for that incident. During the investigation, information was uncovered and the police chief recommended a temporary closure to the courts. Temporarily closing the courts was in no way an easy decision. You know, I'm a former Lakewood High School athlete. I worked for Lakewood Recreation as a youth athletics supervisor for years. I really understand the value of that outlet to our community and all recreational outlets to our community. But as mayor, my role is to balance safety and security in Lakewood with the free and open enjoyment of our treasured Lakewood parks. At the end of the day, you know, I'll take the criticism for being overly cautious, but what I can't do is ignore what our police department was recommending based on their investigation. So with that, I did make the decision to agree with the police chief's recommendation for a temporary closure. And I'm happy to see that that was temporary and the courts are back up. That incident has certainly rattled our entire community, and for good reasons. You know, our parks are our local treasures and everyone should feel safe to use them anytime, day or night. Since the first incident that happened at Madison Park, I've been working hand in hand with our police department and community partners to come up with solutions to keep our parks safer, which I'll talk a little bit about on the next slide. I do understand that increased police presence may not make everyone feel safer. So recently I sent a communication to the Anti-Racism Task Force to make recommendations for equity and inclusion for everyone, especially our BIPOC community. I know council did the same thing as well, and we're looking forward to their feedback later next month. Next slide, please. So in this slide, I've included some short and long-term solutions to improve safety in our parks. The short-term solutions are really just that. They're short-term. None of us want to live in an environment where we have to have a police officer at our parks at all times. Really, it's going to take, and I've seen this from our community, which has been wonderful, our entire community working together to keep our community safe. I love seeing the fact that people have really engaged and are going to Madison Park on Saturday afternoons, almost like a block party atmosphere. That's really what it's going to take. It's going to take all of us working together. But here's what we're doing at the city. Increased patrols at the parks. So when our patrol officers, when they have some time in between calls, they've been instructed to go to all of our parks and when possible, get out of their cars, walk around. That's something Chief Kauchek and I had started working on before any of these high profile incidents happen. We really want to focus on community policing, and me and Chief Kauchek are very much aligned in that effort. So get out, try to get on the bike patrols more, really talk to our community and interact more with our community. We also have an officer assignment at Madison Park during peak hours during the evening, 7 days a week. We've pulled in additional funding sources to make sure that there is an officer presence during those peak times. That will be going on indefinitely. We've also added high-tech police cameras. As many of you know, we do have police cameras throughout the city. That investment goes back to around 2006. And ever since then, every administration has continued to invest in these cameras. My administration is no different. There's also, what's different now though, is these higher tech police cameras that have, the first set have already been installed within our community, and the next set should be installed here shortly. Adding security guards to our parks. So we already have security guards in our parks. In fact, one of the security guards was one of the first people to respond to the scene at Madison Park. But we're making sure that we have full coverage at Madison Park with our security guards. I'm meeting regularly, as I have been my entire administration, with our police department to talk about what we can do to continue to make Lakewood a safe community. Since the day I started running for office in Lakewood, when I pulled petitions to be a Lakewood City Councilman, I always said that safety is my top priority, and that's not lip service, that really is. We have to be a safe community. People need to feel safe in our community, because all the great things that we're doing, they don't mean nearly as much if we're not safe. So I interact regularly with our police department to make sure that we're safe. Also trauma response, that could be under short or long term, but we want to develop a trauma response program. The trauma of this incident has impacted all of our community. And we also have trauma from the last year of a pandemic. So we want to make sure we have appropriate trauma response. The Lakewood City Schools have provided a letter to parents informing them of resources that are available through the schools for response to trauma. We here at City Hall work with Frontline Services. So anyone that you may know that was impacted by the traumatic events at Madison Park, or even COVID, please contact our Human Services Department and we can get you in touch with Frontline Services. So the long term. Reduce access to guns. We all know this is a national issue, and us at the local level can do so much. I've been advocating on my end in this capacity as much as possible. We just have too much access to guns in our nation. But we also want to enact a community stewardship program, as Councilwoman Keppel had mentioned. This is in its very much infancy phases, and we are making sure we're doing all of the legwork before we roll this out to the community, because we only have one chance to roll it out and to roll it out properly. What this is a partnership with Metro Health, and also piggybacking off of what happened in Slavic Village, which we have a partnering off what happened in Slavic Village, this community mentorship program, having community members go out and talk to individuals about trauma, and so that we can really start engaging the public. And so we look forward to engaging the community in the stewardship program here in the near future. Work with LOBC on mentor programs. So for years, we've had a partnership with LOBC where we had a mentor in summer months float between parks at the basketball courts to build relationships. We have expanded that grant program and right now are working on the final touches of what that means. But essentially we're going to have more mentors at the parks engaging with the basketball players to make sure that there's some additional adult presence. That program traditionally runs June, July, and August. We've brought that individual who's partnered with us in the past through LOBC. He started as a May 1st. And again, we're working through getting other mentors up and running. And finally, work with the Anti-Racism Task Force. You know, we need to create a better place for all of our residents. And this is going to be a long-term community-driven approach that intentionally includes members of the BIPOC community who are disproportionately impacted by gun violence. As I mentioned on the last slide, I recently sent a communication along with City Council to the Anti-Racism Task Force so they can assist and begin to develop solutions and initiatives to address some of these goals. I want everyone to feel safe, to feel welcome in our great community of Lakewood. Next slide, please. Switching gears just a bit, but since we're on police a little bit, I want to remind everyone about Lakewood Police Department's award-winning crisis intervention team. This is a program that I'm very proud of, and we're working to enhance throughout our department. These specialized officers are able to tap into specialized training in crisis situations and de-escalate situations. The officers pictured in this photo received the Medal of Honor for their work in de-escalating a situation that saved the life of a man a few years back who was threatening to leap from a building. So our police department is a well-trained group of individuals who work tirelessly to keep us safe. We have a supervisor in charge of training, and they receive more training than the state requires. So I just wanted to at least touch on our crisis intervention team as well. Next slide, please. So we're going to switch gears a bit again and to talk about 2020, where we've been and what a challenging year this has been for really for each and every one of us, both personally and professionally. Every single one of us has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So the next couple of slides, I wanted to point out what the city has done and what our response has been to COVID-19. So early in March, I created an internal task force that started to meet regularly to address both employee and citywide needs. Being a new mayor, I knew that there was a big challenge ahead of us. So what this task force was made up was a member of every department where we would sit in the city council auditorium and talk about, okay, how do we keep our employees safe, but also deliver the services to the Lakewood community that are needed. You know, our police still need to respond to police calls. Our fire and EMS still need to respond to EMS and fire calls. Our refuse still needs to be picked up. How do we do that safety? And again, if you could think back to March of 2020, there was so much unknown about COVID at that time. How is it transmitted? How are we going to keep people safe? So how do we keep our employees and people safe, but give the services to Lakewood? And I really credit the work of that task force and that allowed us to continue to deliver so many services to the Lakewood community during the pandemic. For instance, bulk pickup. A lot of communities, paused bulk pickup, only had it to once a month, twice a month. Our refuse never stopped bulk pickup. And again, I credit the work that we did during those early days of the task force to make sure that our community got the services they needed. We met every single day for months. And now we're still meeting, albeit just about once a month now. But there was a lot of good work that came from that task force. We also wanted to limit exposure of COVID to our residents, and we wanted to inform the residents in our community of what was happening with COVID. Again, bring yourself back to March of 2020. All of us were looking for news outlets and trying to get accurate information. So what we did was we created 2 web pages here at the city devoted to providing up-to-date information about COVID-19. There was the coronavirus page and the coronavirus business resources page. We would pull in information from federal, state, county, and Lakewood related information and put it on those coronavirus pages so that our residents knew, okay, here's a place that you can go for accurate information on COVID. We tried to post regular updates on our social media channels. We also created a phone line for our residents. Again, taking back to those early days of COVID, many of our senior population, they don't have internet access or they don't follow us on social media. So a phone line is what they would be used to. So we created this phone line. We would record messages on COVID-19 updates. So that I was making sure that we were communicating as best as we can with all members of our community. We did mail some COVID some COVID mailings to our community to let everyone know that we are on top of COVID. And then within our departments here at City Hall, we installed plexiglass barriers, social distancing markers. We had hand sanitizing stations, everything that we could really to keep our community as safe as possible and our employees. Internally, we created a COVID-19 playbook so that employees, if they're unsure of what we were doing at the city to keep them safe, that they could refer to the playbook. And our HR department would update this playbook every so often as we got further guidance from the CDC. Another thing that we created was the Small Business Task Force. Knowing that we were going to have an issue with our small businesses being able to stay open during the pandemic, we created the Small Business Task Force, had members of Lakewood Alive, Lakewood Chamber, and members of the business community, as well as City Council invited to join to come up with what things could the city do and what things could we implement to help our businesses during the pandemic. And a lot of good ideas came out of that task force. For instance, the express parking that you may see as you're traveling around Lakewood. We developed a 15-minute express parking for carryout. That was a really good item that came out of those task force meetings. And then finally, the last bullet point here, no full-time workers were laid off during the pandemic. I'm really proud of that. A lot of other municipalities did lay off workers facing the revenue losses that were being predicted early on in 2020. The next slide is going to get into this a bit, but we put in some fiscal austerity measures early on, which enabled us to keep all of our full-time employees. That means all of those employees were able to go home, receive a paycheck, pay their mortgage, feed their families, but also they were doing the job. They were keeping the services open as much as we could in a safe manner to our community. Next slide, please. Okay, so about those fiscal austerity measures, early in April, we had a freeze in hiring, travel, training, new contract services, overtime, what have you. We really fine-tuned what every department was doing in terms of budget and just slashed it because we were early predictions looking at a $5 million loss in revenue. We limited discretionary spending. We curbed capital spending. We paused some major projects. For instance, had to make the really difficult decision to pause the Cove Church project, which is such a wonderful project and so important and timely now, where we're bringing all of our human services under one department. That project had not yet started, and a funding source hadn't been identified yet. And again, looking at the idea of $5 million in lost revenue, I had to make the difficult decision to pause that project until we could get more financially stable, if you will. Luckily, by early fall, the project resumed and is slated to open up to the public in early 2022. Two of the major cost saving programs that we implemented was an overtime reduction and a voluntary furlough program. Our overtime reduction saved the city over $500,000 compared to 2019. And then we also had a voluntary furlough program where we asked employees to voluntarily furlough for a shift. And that saved the city over $500,000 as well. So over $1 million in real savings through overtime and voluntary furlough. And that really helped us at the end of the year to meet our budget needs. The final bullet point here, and Director Leininger is going to talk more about this. We're one of the very first communities in Ohio to establish a small business rent relief program. And then we later established the residential rent relief program. The small business rent relief program has helped to date over 207 small businesses with over $750,000 in rental assistance. Our residential rent relief program has helped 660 households with $1.1 million in assistance. I really credit both of those programs in helping our residents and our small business community really get through this pandemic. Early on when we were facing the shutdown, I realized, our small businesses are really the lifeblood of our community. And if they're not able to be open to have their customers shopping at our small businesses, they're not going to be able to pay rent for the next month. So we got that program up and running and released it before the end of March of 2020. And I need to credit the planning department as well for their hard work in getting that program up and running. Okay, so 2021, where we're going. Obviously, COVID-19 is still a major focus. It's going to be a major focus until we get enough of our population vaccinated. I mean, those are just the facts. But we're accustomed to and we're dealing with COVID-19, and that allows us to start to work on some of the other initiatives that I was so hopeful for when I took office in January of 2020. One of those was enhanced communication from City Hall and trying to engage with our community. Now, that's been quite difficult during a pandemic when this has really been our only means of communication is a Zoom or social media or our website. But we've enhanced our social media presence. I was very excited, just recently relaunched a new e-newsletter. There's a link on your screen where you can sign up to receive monthly newsletters from the city so you can hear about all the great things that we're doing on in our community. So I encourage everyone to do that. I also want to mention that we are going to switch our website. It's going to be lakewood.oh.gov, and that switch will happen at the end of the month. Earlier this month, the Federal Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency took over the resignation and process for obtaining a .gov top-level domain name. Having all U.S. government websites at the federal, state, and local level on a .gov is a top national security issue. The .gov lets people know that a website they're using is official. So we will be making that switch here at the end of the month. The One Lakewood will be available for the next year, but it'll transition you over to the .gov. So if you have One Lakewood saved in your browser, make sure to update your browser. 2020, again, water sewer is always important. The next few slides do talk about water sewer. And then we continue to invest in our parks and our tree canopy and our community assets. There are so many great things going on within our community. And I hope you take away some of that during the rest of the presentation here today. Okay, so water sewer, I wanted to provide everyone an update on where we are with the implementation of our integrated wet weather improvement plan, or IWIP for short. This is a large, complex plan that has been in the works for several years and was approved by City Council back when I was on council in 2018. Our next step in this plan is to look at equitable ways to pay for required water and sewer updates. Part of that includes a review of our current water and sewer rate structure. Now, Lakewood's water sewer system is unique, and that is certainly a benefit to Lakewood, meaning that both the US and Ohio regulators understand that Lakewood is a unique system. And actually, in fact, it wasn't built as a system at all. Our sewers were largely built at the turn of the last century as independent projects that moved household sewage away from homes as efficiently as possible. And back then, it was discharged directly into the lake or river. The system itself was connected decades later. Some of our sewers are built with a single pipe combined sewer, but most of Lakewood was built with two pipes, a storm and a sanitary, like the picture above. The regulators have recognized our uniqueness, and that is important because they are working with us to find the best projects to address our unique system. Next slide. Lakewood has continuously invested in our water sewer system. And this is really important when we deal with the regulators. We've raised our capture and ability to treat from 79 to 85%. That's a really important number. There's many communities spending millions of dollars just to get to that percentage, but Lakewood, we're there. But since we're on the Lake Erie and Rocky River watersheds, we have higher levels of control that must be met. The high rate treatment project down by the wastewater treatment plant will raise our percentage of capture to 88%. In our 5-year IWIP blocks plan to invest $50 million on the next 2 cycles. At that point, we will be able to remove 95% of the pollutants that come from our system, captured and treated. This is a huge investment, and it needs to be done to increase our capture and treat rates, which is required by the US and Ohio EPA regulators. On top of that, we keep up with regular water sewer improvements to continue to meet the IWIP. For instance, both Andrews and Gladys are slated to have water main replacements in 2022. Next slide. We continue to speak regularly with the US and Ohio EPA regulators. In fact, we had an hours-long technical meeting with them just today, and they continue to agree that our IWIP is the correct and best path forward. Now, we had hoped to hear back from them on whether or not we would receive a consent decree by the end of last year, but COVID delayed that response. We hope to hear something soon on whether or not we will get a consent decree. City Council has approved the IWIP, as mentioned, and rate increases have been approved through 2023. The regulators, when we speak with them, see this as a very strong sign of our commitment to the implementation of the IWIP. The question is, in 2023 and after, how do we afford these required capital sewer projects? We need to determine what is equitable and how we meet these needs. Our current water system rates are based on water usage. Increases so far from the high rate treatment plant and improvements to date, but we need additional increases to fund the next phase of the IWIP. And the structure of these increases is going to be very important. We have a very old system, and a plant that needs continuous investment as well, which require more funding in the years ahead. Now, we do have the benefit of time to get things started so that predictable and small rate increases are equitable. Next slide, please. In partnership with our consultants, we've reviewed the city's ability to pay for the $274 million infrastructure program over many years. Right now, all water and sewer projects are being paid from the money water and sewers customers pay on their water bills, which is based entirely on the volume of potable water used. With advanced technology and more water efficient appliances, the volume of water used by our customers has reduced by approximately 20% over the past 10 years, which directly reduces the city's revenue. No fees are based on the relative wet weather impacts on the system, which is what drives the improvement costs. Many communities in our region use a fixed charge or impervious area charges, including Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, Columbus, Elyria, et cetera. These are commonplace, these impervious area charges in most districts. Next slide, please. These discussions and the implementation of the IWIP have been ongoing for years. In 2019, the city had public meetings and asked for public input. The impervious charge was what the majority of the public agreed was the most equitable. In the coming months, I will be requesting City Council to allocate half of the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds, towards our significant water and sewer infrastructure needs. The ARPA funds will provide significant assistance in the near term by allowing us to reduce our planned rate increases back to a simple inflationary level increases, which will help our water customers recovering from the pandemic's financial impacts. However, the one-time ARPA funds will not cover all the needs of the city that we have in the decades ahead. We must use this moment to move to more equitable ways to sustain progress. A dedicated impervious fee is the best approach to equitably recover the cost of wet weather management because they reflect each property's demand on the city's wet water infrastructure. These fees are an essential component to the proper financial sustainability of modern utilities, and as mentioned, are common among neighboring communities and across the country. Introducing this fee at a modest level allows all property owners to understand the new billing structure without undue financial pressure. Starting the fee in January of 2022 allows the new structure to be up and running while we have the ARPA funds to support the sewer program. We will be bringing this utility fee structure reform package to council in June after a meeting with an advisory task force and holding a community conversation on June 16th. This impervious surface fee is a start to a more modernized and sustainable building system. Next slide, please. So those are a few of the updates on my end. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the city. I could probably talk for hours, but Sean is going to give you probably the more exciting part of the presentation, which are the economic development and plans. Just a little bit about Sean. He came to us in July of 2020. Sean has over 20 years of municipal planning, zoning, and community and economic development experience. His previous experience was assistant town manager in Bluffton, South Carolina. He was director of public service and development for our neighbor to the west in Fairview Park. And most recently, we were able to acquire him from this position as executive director at the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission. He currently serves as vice chair of the Northeast Ohio First Suburbs Development Council and has a master's in city and regional planning from Ohio State University. I always embarrass him with his accolades, but I really, truly, we're really lucky to have someone of Sean's caliber working for the city of Lakewood. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who can talk about some of the exciting things going on in the city.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the kind words in the introduction. And again, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of your State of the City address. So for those on the call this evening, I'm going to follow the same flow that the mayor did. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about where we've been the past year, and then transition into what are the things that we're working on for this year. Along the way, we'll talk about development projects, a lot of the projects hopefully that you've heard about over the last couple of years and recently. And then also focus in on some city projects and try to drill in on those that are within Ward 3. So really to begin, and really it's a good starting point because it's where we spent the last year, as the mayor talked about in her presentation. I want to touch upon the various support programs that the city established in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So shortly after the issuance of the stay-at-home order that would ultimately shut down most businesses for 2 months, the city launched several programs, including a small business assistance program, and soon after that, a residential rent assistance program. The small business program provides up to $7,000 in rent or job retention assistance to qualifying businesses that have up to 50 employees. And since Lakewood is so small business driven, that includes most businesses that are in our community. Alternatively, the residential rent assistance program provides rent assistance to income qualified residents that have or are being financially impacted by the pandemic. In addition to these financial programs, we've also provided some non-financial assistance to support businesses and customers, including creating an express parking program that maintains these 15-minute high turnover spaces 24/7, ultimately with the goal of supporting socially distanced drop-off, pickup, shopping, and dining. And so on the slide is actually a photo of one of the signs that hopefully you've seen them out the community and hopefully taken advantage of. There's a couple of dozen of these now. So keep an eye out. They're usually at the beginnings or ends of the block, depending on which direction you're going, but take advantage of them when you're doing your drop-offs and pickups. We also created opportunities for more outdoor dining by flexing our dimensional and locational standards, as well as eliminating our time of year when outdoor dining could occur. And by doing that, we created actually over 24 additional opportunities for outdoor dining. As part of COVID, we all hear that it's better to be outside, still socially distanced, but if we can eat and dine outside, we try to create as many opportunities for that in the community as were possible. But before I move on to this from this topic, Mayor George touched upon some of these numbers, but I just want to share with you what that looks like and the results from our past efforts and actually ongoing efforts in providing COVID-19 assistance. So thus far, we have approved over 660 residential rent assistance applications. And what that translates into, we've helped over 1,200 residents as part of that program. We've also approved 207 applications that assist Lakewood businesses. To date, we've awarded over $1.2 million in residential rent assistance, and then over $775,000 in for small business. In total, we have available just over $1.3 million to help our residents and just over $900,000 to help small business. What that means is that there's still money available. So if you own a business or you're a renter in the city and that qualifies, or perhaps you know someone that does, please reach out to our partners at Lakewood Alive if you're looking for business assistance, or to the Lakewood Community Services Center for residential rent assistance, and take advantage of this resource while the city's able to provide it. These funds aren't limited, they're available now, so please don't delay if we can help your business or a resident. So we're going to change gears a couple of times throughout this presentation. And right now we're going to move on to development activity in Lakewood. And so one great indicator of the strength of investment that's occurring in our community is building permit activity. So in 2020, both permit activity and construction valuation remained strong. In fact, we had the 4th highest permit volume year and the 5th highest construction value year out of the last 10 years. Now, keep in mind, during 2020, we shut down for 2 months and we still had, we were still at the top of the last 10 years. Moving forward, though, as the mayor had mentioned, COVID-19 is absolutely impacting labor supply, material availability, material prices, and that is in turn causing some delays in projects. Those projects aren't stopping, especially those big projects that we've talked about or you've heard about, whether it's the downtown redevelopment site, the Soloff projects, the Studio West. all of them are still advancing. The pace is just a little bit different. Between just those projects alone over the next couple of years, we know that we're going to add nearly $150 million in additional permit activity to the city just with those projects. So just walk away from this knowing that things are still happening. The pace is just different while we're in some weird times with labor and material prices. So another great indicator of our economy, especially in a bedroom community like Lakewood, is home sales. So this slide indicates what's been happening really the last 5 years in the single family home market. So what we can see on here is that the median sales price has increased from 56%, or has increased 56% from $154,000 in 2016 to $240,000 in 2020. If we look back a little bit further off of these slides to 2011, the median sales price was actually just over $112,000. That's an increase of 114% to today's value in 2020. Not only are the homes selling for more of them are selling, and they are not staying on the market long. So last year there were 586 single family home sales in the city, which was a 10-year high for sales. And the median days on the market was only 30 days, which is a 10-year low. Also important to note, of those 586 home sales, 55% of the closings were at or above the list price. So what you're hearing in the national news about the housing market is absolutely true here in Lakewood, from a volume, from a value, and the length of time on the market. It's definitely a seller's market right now. So while all of that is great news for homeowners that are looking to sell their homes in the community, it does put tremendous amount of pressure on the affordability of Lakewood. Fortunately, the city does have an award-winning affordable housing strategy that helps guide investment into affordable housing initiatives. Primarily, we invest our federal CDBG, which is Community Development Block Grant, and our home funds into the construction and rehab of owner-occupied and rental housing, ultimately that supports income-qualified households. In 2020, the city provided over $545,000 to support 44 properties, and that included the rehab and sale of a home on Orchard Grove. In addition to the rehab, repair, accessibility, and maintenance programs that we manage, this year we are also building 2 new single-family homes that will ultimately be sold to income-qualified households. And so the images on the slide here are some early renderings of what those homes look like. Both one on Shaw and the other on Plover. And both of these are under construction right now. If you were to drive by, hopefully they look very similar to what these images are showing. So besides investing our federal funds into affordable housing, we do also make available a property tax abatement incentive to developers in exchange for providing affordable housing as part of their construction projects. And I'll highlight what that means in a couple of slides as we talk about the solar projects. So this is our second change gear. We're gonna focus a little bit on updating everybody on a few of the major development projects that are occurring in the city. And we're gonna start with the downtown redevelopment site. Certainly a lot has changed in the past year or two. If looking at this image, this is what the site generally looks like today. If we were to just have a picture of this side by side from just 2 years ago, we would have seen the hospital existing on the site prior to its demolition. And hopefully, as you're likely aware, last year the city did separate from the previous developer. When we did that, at that time, we were planning to pivot towards Casto and North Point Realty, who were the other developer that was selected through the 2017 RFP process. This past December, City Council approved that pivot. And since that time, and since that approval, and recognizing a lot has changed on the site since 2017, we've been spending our time working with Casto and the North Point Realty team to provide them an update on the current site conditions. And in turn, they are taking and modifying their plans accordingly. At the same time, we're negotiating the term sheet that provides the larger basis for a more detailed development agreement that will be finalized as we get deeper into the design, approval, and public participation process. And we've also re-engaged with the advisory panel that was originally created to help evaluate the original RFP submittals. In this case, they're helping advise the city on the updated proposal that Casto is preparing and ultimately going to be presenting here in the next couple of weeks to the panel. So please know, a couple of things in addition to what I said earlier, walk away from this presentation knowing that there's a lot happening. We're going to see a lot of things start to happen over the next several months as that updated proposal gets put together. And then we'll enter into the public review and the zoning process to really help guide and shape this development as it moves forward. Just to note, because this has come up from previous presentations, the images on this slide are, I label them as not current. These are from the original RP submittal in 2017. So we do expect to see some changes from what was shown here, just given certain site conditions as well as the market. So Solov Development has two projects that sit almost equidistant from the downtown redevelopment site. The first one I'll talk about is on the former Barry Buick properties that are located on Detroit between Cranford and Rosewood. The project is known as the View West. It's a mixed-use project with 160 units spread across 4 stories with a first floor commercial space. As I shared previously, the city has made available a tax incentive to provide affordable housing. So this, along with the View East, which I'll talk about next, will be the first projects that utilize this incentive. And what that means in this case is that 20% of the building, or since there's 160 units, 32 units will be made available for the income qualified persons or households for a period of 15 years. In exchange, Solov will receive a 15-year tax abatement on the improved value. So Solov will continue to pay the existing taxes that are on the site today. The only thing that gets abated is the improved value. Right now, Solov is currently working to complete the property acquisitions and their construction drawings, ultimately with the goal of submitting for building permits. Based on our last conversations, we still expect this project to kick off sometime later this year. Hopefully this fall, if not as we move into the winter months. And so this is a rendering of the development looking east down Detroit and kind of south as we look deeper into downtown. And then the second of the Solov projects is on the former Spitzer Chrysler site that's near Detroit and Bunce. So this is the View East. It's a smaller sibling to the View West. Still a mixed-use project, but instead of 160 units, it has 120 units, also spread across 4 stories with a first floor commercial space. The project will also include that same affordability component that I mentioned with the View West. Math on this is still the same, so 120% of the building will be made affordable. So 120 units, that means 24 units will be made affordable for a period of 15 years. This project's a little bit farther behind the View West. Right now, this is actually in front of our Architectural Board of Review. They're up for approval on Thursday. And so we're about a 6-month gap in the 2 projects. So this is, well, we're hopeful this could get going this year. This is most likely a beginning of 2022 project. And so this is one of the renderings that's actually in front of ABR, or Architectural Board of Review, right now. There may be some tweaks to this, but this gives you a general sense of the design, the architecture for the building. There are 2 buildings. I'm focused in on one here. There's kind of like an alpha and a beta building. This is the alpha. A lot of the same characteristics carry over to the other building, which is all residential. This has some of the commercial components included in it, as well as the offices and leasing areas. So finally, for the major development updates, Daniel Budish and Betsy Figge are leading the development team that will ultimately convert the former Mac Products manufacturing space that's on Hurd Avenue, right behind the former Fantasy nightclub on Detroit, into an LGBTQ entertainment and restaurant venue. So it's a 20,000 square foot adaptive reuse project that's going to be ultimately occupied with a Latinx restaurant, a pizza kitchen, and really the signature piece is a new rec facility that has a mezzanine track that's going to support fitness, volleyball, dodgeball, and the larger Stonewall sports community. The field house is really going to be the first phase of a multi-phase project that will also include the historic rehab of the former Fantasy nightclub, which is also going to provide a range of opportunities for the LGBTQ community. So when complete, Studio West as the 2 buildings, as well as some things that are happening in the area, including some of which is across the corporate line in Cleveland, When it's complete, Studio West is not only going to serve as an anchor for the gay community, but it's also going to serve as an eastern gateway on Detroit Avenue for the Lakewood community. Building permit drawings for this project have been submitted and are being reviewed. We're looking for this project to start hopefully sometime in the third quarter of this year, if not early fourth quarter. The Fantasy Rehab is tracking just behind it. They're in their planning and design phase right now. That'll probably continue through the rest of the year. Then we'll see construction on the rehab of the Fantasy building in 2022. So looking into 2021, we do have a number of other exciting projects that we're looking forward to. A couple of which are located in Ward 3, the Marlowe Townhomes, which are under construction, the Lake Avenue homes, which the utilities are in. We expect last update from the developer is that foundation starts will happen at the end of May. The Beck Center is making a small improvement in addition to a larger master plan and renovation plan that they're doing on the building. This year, they're working on a small retrofit of the green space that's in front of their building. The one thing that we're excited about all these projects, but we're really excited about the historic preservation and adaptive reuse projects that are starting to funnel into our pipeline of economic development projects. And so these are a few of them that are on the screen, with the St. James School and Rectory converting to an office use. Trinity Lutheran Church, which the city acquired a couple of years ago, working with Scalish Construction to reuse that property for office uses. The By-Right building, purchased by Jim Makito several years ago, received historic tax credits from the state of Ohio. We expect to see his project moving ahead with, again, converting that building to office uses. St. Cyril and Methodius in Birdtown was recently acquired by Kinez Development for their offices. And then the former Board of Education buildings are owned by Liberty Development, and they're looking to convert that to a residential product as well. And they also have a historic tax credit application pending with the state of Ohio. So there's a lot of great things that are happening in the community from the development side. So I think this is our last time we're going to change gears, and now we're going to focus in on some city projects that are on the schedule for this year. So the first one up is Lakewood Community Center. So in 2019, the city acquired the former Cove Church for the purposes of consolidating the Human Services Department and their support for children through seniors, and bringing that together into a single intergenerational location. The plans are complete. They're being bid. Actually, the bids were due today. So hopefully tomorrow we'll get some really good news on some good bidding. But the plans are complete, and we're getting ready to begin the adaptive reuse of the former church, and construction will begin later this summer. The site will also still feature stormwater storage component to it that'll assist the city in dealing with combined sewer overflows that go into Lake Erie. Still an important part of the project, but that's a separate project apart from the redevelopment of the building. The mayor had mentioned the IWIP plan. As part of the IWIP plan, that particular project is still several years out on the horizon, but very much still an important part of this overall project. These are some renderings from the inside of this site. Also the outside, you can see some of the open space improvements that are going to happen along the Lake Avenue frontage. And as you come into the first floor with the entry areas, what's going to happen with creating a true community center within the sanctuary space, and then downstairs with the family room. Improvements to Kaufman Park are actually out to bid right now. Work will begin on this project later this summer. This project is going to provide a major update to the park that's going to include ADA accessibility improvements as you come off of the Detroit entrance. We're going to provide a circuit walking path. We're going to provide a picnic shelter. We're also going to upgrade the play equipment with a nature-based theme, and also introduce a new water play feature right off the edge of the play equipment. One of the other things that we're going to do is introduce some public art in the project. We're going to repurpose the blades of grass that are currently at the Detroit Sloan intersection into the park. And also want to thank Cuyahoga County. They provided $50,000 in casino funds through what's called a community development supplemental grant. They provided those funds to help support this project. We're also making some improvements to Fire Station 2 that include the addition of an apparatus bay, a dedicated equipment storage, and upgraded laundry facilities to really help improve the care and storage of contaminated gear and clothing that the fire department utilizes in carrying out their duties. Construction on this is currently underway and is scheduled to be complete later this year. Later this month, actually on May 24th is the date we have from the contractor. Construction is going to begin on pedestrian safety, utility, and streetscape improvements on Detroit Avenue between Sloan and Graber. So this project is really going to make permanent some of the painted curb lines and ultimately reduce a lane on Detroit to support pedestrian safety and the continuation of the Metro Parks all-purpose trail from the Rocky River Reservation, which right now it's on the west side of Valley Parkway and terminates as you come up to the Detroit Sloan intersection. We're actually going to carry that out of the park and bring it along the south side of Detroit over to Graber. And then as part of larger planning efforts that we're making, we'll pick that up and carry that trail elsewhere into the community. In addition to those improvements, it will also create opportunities for stormwater improvements, ability to create a softer, greener gateway as you come into our community from Rocky River, particularly at the Sloan intersection and at that bend at Graber. And so these are some images, renderings of early renderings of what the existing conditions were, and then what what the design intent is, both at the northeast corner looking back into Blackbird, and then at in front of Harry Buffalo at the bend, and what the opportunities to kind of soften that with some landscaping, provide some high quality materials, and then ultimately have some public art interventions. And so there, you see a couple of placeholders on here, just as it's not what the art's going to look like. It's not going to be on a slab. There's a whole separate RFP process that we're going through to understand what that public art intervention is and what does it look like. And so although this is a city project, we are absolutely grateful for the support of the Metro Parks in this effort and their commitment to maintain the continuation of Valley Parkway Trail as it comes out of the Rocky River Reservation into the city of Lakewood. We have some major improvements that we're currently planning for Hilliard Road. The city is designing a resurfacing project that will begin at the bridge over the Rocky River and extend all the way to Warren Road. So in addition to resurfacing, we're going to be adding bike lanes to the roadway, very similar to those that were added on Lake Avenue. Design will be complete this year with construction beginning in 2022. Separate from this, Cuyahoga County is also planning to replace the Hilliard Road Bridge that's over Rocky River, and they are currently working on their design plans. These plans will be complete sometime in 2022, with then work scheduled to begin on the bridge replacement in 23. As I said, that is a bridge replacement, meaning they are going to remove the existing bridge and construct a new bridge, meaning that there will be some detours in place for a couple-year period while that work is done. We're still a couple years out. The county will be, and the city with the county will be working to manage traffic and properly notify and detour traffic through this area when we get to that point. So as the city, or as the mayor shared, the city is making significant improvements to its sewer infrastructure. The wastewater treatment plant has a high rate treatment facility that's nearly complete. The facility will process high volume flows that come to the plant during certain rain events, particularly high intensity rain events, and help eliminate the need to overflow sewers into the Rocky River. And commissioning and testing is ongoing through this year and should be in full operation in 2022. Along with the high rate treatment facility, there is a digester project that's currently being completed and is under commissioning and testing. And so what a digester is it breaks down organic waste that is captured and processed at the plant. That should be fully operational this summer. All these improvements are geared towards making the sewer plant as efficient as possible so it can handle all the flows, whether it's wet weather flows or just regular sewer flows, and eliminate our need to discharge into the Rocky River and other areas into Lake Erie. So before we focus in on some Ward 3 projects as we start to wrap up the presentation, I just want to share that the city does maintain a spectacular vernacular public art program that really creates private partnerships in support of public art. So these are a few of the recent examples that are on your screen. We sprinkled a couple of other ones throughout the presentation. If you'd like to know more about public art, where it's located, how you can go see it, if you go to onelakewood.com/public art, or at the end of this month and after May 27th, if you go to lakewoodoh.gov/public art, or just go to our website and search in the search bar for public art, it'll take you to the landing page where there's an interactive map, and you can see the many public art installations that already exist in our community. So the weather's getting nicer. We've been in our houses for a long time. Get out, enjoy the weather. There's some great selfie spots along the way. Go and check out some of the great artist work that's in our community. And stay tuned. We just closed out, or closed out the application period for our 2021 Spectacular Vernacular program. So we have a lot of other public art that's going to be coming to the community here over the next year. So let's spend a few minutes and focus on some projects that are happening in Ward 3. So within Lakewood Park, Foster Pool, built in the 1950s, last updated in the 1980s. The pool will begin a renovation in the near future. So the city is currently soliciting proposals from design firms to help lead us through a public input and design process. And that process will kick off this summer. The goal is as we collect feedback and we go through design, that we could then transition quickly into a construction project. We also recognize there's a lot we still need to get through that public process and through the design efforts to understand what the full scope of the project is, and then also budget appropriately for it. So stay tuned on this. We actually just received the consultant resumes, if you will, or proposals, and we're evaluating those, and hopefully we'll have a consultant on board soon, so we can really engage in the public involvement over the summertime, particularly when the pool's in use. So we'll stay in Lakewood Park for just a second. We are currently replacing the former skate house with a modern men's and women's restroom facility. This is an early rendering of the building showing the design and the concepts for the inclusion of public art into the project. This is actually under construction right now, so the building's actually up under roof and has the walls. So they're working on the interior finishes and other things as they continue through this construction. So the city has been very fortunate to receive $35,000 from NOPEC and $15,000 from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency to support the expansion of electric vehicle charging stations in the city. This year, we're going to be adding 4 new locations with dual port level 2 stations added at Madison Park, City Hall, Lakewood Park, actually near the skate house that I just showed you in the previous slide, and on the Detroit extension near Rio Street. So if you're not familiar with where that area is, as you're coming through the Detroit Avenue, and before you make that turn to head over to Rocky River, if you stay straight on that, there's a bank of angled parking spaces. Down near Rio, we're going to be converting 2 of those spaces for EV charging stations. And so really all this goes to help support the 3 existing stations that we already have, one downtown, the other at Raising Cane's on Parkhaven Row, as well as then we have a fast charger over at Winterhurst. So as we close out, there are a number of other repair and rehab projects that are taking place in Ward 3. We have the Elber Avenue water and sewer improvements that were scheduled to begin yesterday and will be complete in December. On Bell Avenue, we're continuing to replace laterals between Clifton down to the railroad tracks. And then later this year along Detroit Avenue, we're going to be working to optimize signal timing through the entire corridor. It's not just Ward 3, through all 4 wards, by adding GPS timing to each signal and ensuring that they stay in sync with each other. So I'm sure if you've driven down Detroit, you've noticed that you go from one red light to the next, and then traffic starts to back up and platoon particularly through the downtown area. The issue is that all the lights are timed appropriately. They're all working from basically a wind-up watch. And what happens with a wind-up analog watch over time is it starts to come out of sync, and it's not keeping up with time. Well, take and magnify that across every one of our signals, and that's what's happening. So although they're all timed appropriately, they just don't stay in sync with each other. So by adding satellite timing to them, we can keep them not only synced, not only on the right timing, but in sync with each other. So hopefully we can allow better traffic flows through the Detroit corridor. So then the remaining projects that are on here, are in some various stage of planning or design, ultimately with construction scheduled for 2023 or 2024. So stay tuned for some of these other projects that are on the drawing boards right now through the city. So with that, I'm going to close with our contact information. It's been a very busy year in the city. We have an even busier year on the horizon. Know that while we're focused on the construction projects, development projects right now, there's a lot of other planning initiatives, a lot of other projects beyond just what the planning department touches that are going on in the city. So it's an exciting time in the city, and stay tuned, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us with questions. We'll get back to you as we can. And so with that, Mayor, I'll hand it back to you to close us out, and thank you for the time. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this again.
Thanks, Sean. Good, exciting updates for our community. Again, want to thank our elected officials, our council members who are able to join us this evening. And thank you all for joining us as well. I always love to see the community engagement in Lakewood. We're so lucky. We have such an engaged, vibrant community. So good to see so many familiar names on the call this evening. So if there's any questions that didn't get answered, our contact information is on the screen. Don't hesitate to reach out, and have a good evening. Enjoy the sunshine. Thanks. Have a great night.